All right, what's up, fellas? Well, today is probably my favorite part of the whole garage renovation series, and that is setting up a wall-mounted pressure washer system. So I've wanted one of these for years, obviously after having seen all of the Obsessed Garage videos. So I finally got everything today that we're gonna walk through this. I recently picked up an active 2.3 pressure washer, which if you haven't seen that video, check it out. Do kind of an unboxing slash, review, first impressions and everything. It's a fantastic upgrade from my Karcher 1800 that I had for a couple of years. But anyway, I bought that system with a wall-mounted setup in mind. So I'm gonna attempt to go through that. Got the Cox hose reel and the CR Spotless tanks and all that stuff. So I'm gonna walk through all the parts in a minute. But I feel like I should probably issue the necessary disclaimer, which is even though I have done an insane amount of pre-planning and research and everything else that goes into the setup, by no means do I really know what I'm doing, right? So I have less than a rudimentary understanding of plumbing, structural load, and everything else that goes into an install like this. So it definitely should not be treated as an installation guide. Kind of like my other car videos, it's more like a ride along, just kind of showing you how I'm putting this all together. Try to point out some things that I think might be useful to anybody else doing this. Things that works, things that didn't work, heads up, stuff like that. Now I do want to take a quick second to talk about the plumbing kit, the piping kit that we're going to use today. So this is a kit called the FastPipe kit by a company called RapidAir. Now, the only reason that I know anything about wall-mounted pressure washers and everything like that is thanks to Obsessed Garage and the work that Matt Moorman has done in that space. So like he always says, honor the source. Generally, when I'm made aware of a product or maybe a detailing technique or something like that, I try to honor the source by buying from Obsessed Garage. But in this case, took a slightly different path than the pre-bossed kit that they sell. Now, obviously, I can't really speak to any difference in quality between the RapidAir FastPipe kit and the pre-boss kit because I haven't installed this yet, and I won't have a pre-boss kit for comparison. I will say that both kits were designed similarly in the sense that it's aluminum piping, plastic fittings. They were designed for compressed air, but they can accommodate water for a pressure washer system. But in terms of cost, the RapidAir kit is about half of the pre-boss kit. So assuming everything works out and if everything goes well, I would say that this might be a good economical alternative to the pre-bossed kit. Now, neither kit is gonna get you 100% there in terms of installation. You're probably still gonna have to buy a couple of extra parts and fittings, but every single part that I'm gonna go through today, every fitting, every adapter, valve, whatever, I'll put all of this in the description below as a reference for anybody else who might be interested in this setup. So with that said, let's go and check out all the parts that we're gonna install today. Spend some time talking about the fittings. My setup is just a tiny bit, customized compared to the ones that you typically see. And I'll explain that a little bit, and then we will get to the installation. So excited. So let's go and check out the parts. All right, so first up, we have the active 2.3 pressure washer. Again, fantastic unit. Check out that video if you haven't already. So this is an excellent getting into the prosumer pressure washer sort of arena. If you're looking for a new one, highly recommend. Really happy with it. Next up, we got the shelf. So this is a 10 by 20 aluminum shelf, still has the wrapping on it, but this is what this is gonna sit on. Now you can mount this directly to the wall. The cage has the holes, the mounting holes that you can mount it directly. Actually, I'm going to remove the pressure washer and then just sit that on the shelf. It is removable, which is cool. Next up, we have the Cox hose reel. So I'm gonna pair that with a 75-foot Cobra Jet hose. Now, when it comes to hose lengths, for these types of setup, it's typical to do 50, 75, or 100. I have been using a 50-foot hose for a little while now. I'm gonna increase that length to 75 just because it's gonna be mounted on the wall. So I'm gonna lose a little bit of length there, and I'd like to have just a tad bit more. So I think 75 is gonna be good there. I didn't wanna go 100 because once you get into 100 feet for hose length, you start sacrificing a little bit of pressure, and that extra 25 feet over the 75, I didn't think that was important enough to run the risk of jeopardizing pressure. The jumper hose for the hose reel to the pressure washer. This is the bucket. Well, this was actually meant to be the bucket fill hose. Picked this up from Obsessed Garage. This is a 2.5-foot Continental hose. Super heavy duty, 5/8 inch with 3/4 inch threads. I bought this to be the bucket fill hose, but then noticed that it was too short for my needs. So I'm actually gonna repurpose this to be the water inlet hose for the pressure washer. And instead, for the bucket fill hose, I picked this up. I don't remember what brand this is. Got it on Amazon, 5-foot hose. So this should be sufficient. Now this is a plate I picked up from Obsessed Garage. There's a guy that makes these specifically for them. And what this does is this is the backing plate for the hose reel. So the problem with the hose reel is that it is too narrow to fit on, both studs. If you have a typical 16-inch stud width, this is too narrow. And, given that the weight, this thing is heavy by itself, but consider that plus the weight of a 75-foot hose, plus any residual water in it, you definitely want to have a sturdier setup and have it in both studs. So the guy who makes these sells them directly to Obsessed Garage. What this does is it allows you to have the backing plate directly mounted to the studs. Then you get the mount points for the hose reel onto the backing plate, and they supply all the hardware, which is really cool. All right, next up, got the Spotless CR tanks for the deionizing system. The tanks are in a box somewhere or off camera, but you get the idea. Where I live, it's really hard water, so anytime you're trying to wash your car outside in the sunlight, and the water spots are awful. So over time, if you don't tend to them quickly enough, they can kind of etch into your clear coat. Bad news bears. So really excited to get the Spotless system for doing outside car washes. And then I think as our last piece, got the Mosmatic, is that how you say it? Mosmatic wand holder. Now this is another Obsessed Garage exclusive piece here. So most of the Mosmatic wand holders that you can get online are like 28 or 29 inches. Actually, I think they sell both. This is an 18-inch one. So if you disconnect the wand from the gun, I think with a 29-inch one, it's kind of lost in there and it's tough to fish out. So the 18-inch version makes it so that you can disconnect the wand from the gun and it's just easier to pull out. All right, then tying everything together are the piping and fittings. This is the RapidAir FastPipe system. Like I said, this is kind of a crude exploded view. I'm gonna try to walk through everything here. We'll get to that in a minute. And finally, the last piece that's kind of already done here. This is a 2x4 by 3/4 inch piece of plywood. Now, when I was looking up videos on this setup, I came across one by a YouTuber who goes by Snareman, and for his setup, he mounted this all to this piece of plywood. It's the exact same piece, 2x4 by 3/4 inch birch plywood. You can pick it up at Home Depot. I really like the reasoning behind it, so I copied it. Now, the thing is that when you have the shelf that the pressure washer is gonna sit on, along with the backing plate for the hose reel, those are gonna go directly into the studs, but the consideration here is for the CR tanks. So this product weighs all assembled with the resin in the tanks, weighs about 30 some odd pounds, figure a little bit more with any residual water in there. Now look, I know you can get, heavy duty, drywall anchors that are like 75 or 100 pounds, stuff like that, which probably would be more than sufficient in order to hold this, but it just kind of makes me a little bit nervous, especially considering that you're gonna have this system mounted up to rigid aluminum piping that's all carrying water. So I'm a little nervous to trust that to some drywall anchors. I'm sure people who know better are probably watching this being like, no man, that's actually more than enough that you would need. You're probably right, but I kind of just like the idea of this a little bit better. So what he did, which again I copied, was mount this to the wall. So this is going into the studs. It's the same principle as the mounting plate for the hose reel. So this goes into the studs. I used number 12 3-inch wood screws. I did 6 per side, which is probably a little overkill. Actually, I did 7 originally, but the second one down that I had here, I found might have interfered with the shelf and or the backing plate. And given that those are going directly into the studs, I figured I did not need the one here that was holding this in. So I have 1 up here and then 5 that are spaced about 7 inches apart, the rest of the way down. Again, probably overkill. However, what we're gonna do is that these are in the studs and then the CR tanks are gonna get mounted in the middle here because these are not wide enough to mount directly into the studs. So I painted the edges, got this screwed into the wall, used a 1/2-inch countersink bit in order to recess the screw heads, filled that in with some wood putty and then painted it the rest of the way. I don't know if it comes out on camera, but you can still kind of see where those holes were. So not the bestest job, but all in all, I think it came out pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with it. You're not gonna notice it. And when everything is done, I'll probably run a bead of caulk around the entire thing just to make it look a little bit more finished. All right, well, that was a lot. So let's get into the fittings for the RapidAir kit. All right, now before I get into talking about my slightly customized setup, let's look at the version that you get for this kit, how it's presented on Clean Garage's website. So this is the screenshot for their setup. Now, as you can see, the water comes in on the left and then it kind of loops up and it exits on the right-hand side, mainly because their pressure washer has their water inlet on the right-hand side, so that makes sense. The pass-through valve is in the middle above the tanks, and that all works for this, except for, in my case, and I think the case is with most pressure washers that I've seen, the water inlet is on the left-hand side. So instead of doing that, I figured I would go with the Obsessed Garage version, the typical layout you see with that, which you can modify this kit to do that. You might need an extra part or two, which we'll cover in a minute. But in that version, water comes up on the left and follows all the way up. The pass-through valve is on the left. And then if your pass-through valve is closed and your tank valves are open, it'll loop through and then get the deionized water run up to the pressure washer. So here's how mine is gonna differ a little bit. So first of all, we have the 3/4 inch PEX piping coming in to a reducing T. So this is a 1/2 inch female NPT that then opens back up to a 3/4 inch. So the water flows in through here, and then we come up through here where it starts branching out, right? So much like the Obsessed Garage version or the layout, so it splits at this T. If this valve is closed, if the pass-through valve is closed, then the water diverts through the tanks to go out to the pressure washer. If these valves are closed and this valve is open, then we just come straight out to the pressure washer, split here, and go to the bucket fill. Now the one silly modification, and I say silly because it probably wasn't super necessary, but the one main modification that I made to this setup is that if you looked at the image for the Clean Garage setup, this was originally supposed to be a reducing T. It changes the flow from a 3/4 inch to a 1/2 inch. I just wanted to keep it all 3/4 inches. So what I ended up doing was swapping this out. This was originally the fitting on here, the reducing T, that went to a female 1/2 inch NPT. So I also had a 3/4 inch by 1/2 inch NPT male nipple. So I ended up just taking the cap off of this and put it on here in order to make it a regular T. And then additionally bought another 3/4 inch nipple with a 3/4 inch female NPT fitting. And then picked up a pair of 3/4 inch NPT to 3/4 inch GHT male to male fittings. It was new to me on this project that even though NPT fittings will perfectly accommodate a hose, they're actually not compatible. So the NPT threads don't have a taper or a bevel. I guess it's a bevel, but it doesn't taper at the end, whereas garden hose threads do. So in order to properly fit a garden hose onto an NPT fitting, you need an adapter to go from NPT to GHT. Then when it comes to the bucket fill setup, shout out to Snareman's video because I took this cue from him, and that is integrating the bucket fill hose with the piping kit. So for the Obsessed Garage version, we would have just routed around here if we were having deionized water to go back up to the pressure washer, and instead we replace the elbow with a T, split it off here, get the elbow here, have a 3/4 inch to 3/4 inch male NPT fitting, another female 3/4 inch female to female ball valve, same as the pass-through valve over there, and then another 3/4 inch GHT to NPT male to male thread. And then that goes to the bucket fill hose. And by the way, also the ultimate hose nozzle, not my name for it, actually the name of the product. You can get this on Obsessed Garage. You might be able to get them, I think, on Amazon, a couple of other places. So should be a pretty cool nozzle. So anyway, that is the entire setup. Now, about the aluminum piping. When you order this kit from Clean Garage, you get 4 18-inch segments of aluminum pipe. Now, if you're just doing the regular setup for this, that is enough pipe for this project, and you should have some left over. You figured 72 inches of pipe that you would have gotten for your complete kit. However, in my case, because I needed the extra aluminum piping to go across the bottom, I didn't really need it. I could have used the PEX piping, but I liked the idea of having everything be uniform. Not only did I need the additional aluminum to go across the bottom, but I needed an extra 6 inches or so to come up the wall before we get to the first T and split off and do everything else. Furthermore, because I don't have the pass-through valve in the middle here, it's over there now, a regular 18-inch section of pipe I don't believe would have worked end to end. Now, I did anticipate that, and I did buy a coupler originally thinking that I would just need 2 slightly shorter 18-inch segments to join here. But once I realized that I really needed additional pipe to come along the bottom and up along the sides here, I thought, I'm gonna need some more aluminum piping. Now I went to RapidAir's website and they do sell a 7-foot 6-inch segment of RapidAir pipe along with a 19-foot segment, because again, most of this assumes that you're doing a compressed air setup throughout a shop or something. So I went ahead and got the 7-foot aluminum piping segment here. So yeah, more than enough piping to complete this project. And I'm sure I'm gonna have a bunch left over. And one other thing I wanted to mention real quick about the RapidAir FastPipe kit. Now on Clean Garage's website, it states that it comes with a complete installation kit. So I was a little bit unsure about that. I'm like, well, probably not gonna include, you know, something to cut the aluminum piping. So I went and bought my own. No, actually they really do. So this is FastPipe's own part number F0140 aluminum cutter that they include with the kit. You also get the deburring tool because anytime you make a cut on the aluminum pipe, you have to deburr it before putting it into the fitting. Get some Teflon tape and the wrenches to tighten the fittings, as well as the spray bottle to spray the aluminum pipe end prior to going into the fitting. So yeah, no, it really does come with everything that you need for installation. All right, well that was a lot of talking. Hopefully there was some useful information in there. So let's get to the installation. The first thing that we are gonna do is get the fittings installed on the CR Spotless tanks here. So gonna get the valves and the ball valves and the 3/4 inch to 3/4 inch MPT nipples there. So I'm gonna get that all assembled on here before putting that on the wall, because the one thing I'm kinda a little curious of is how to make sure that the ball valve handles are oriented in the proper direction. I'll point that out in a minute. So I'm gonna get that on the wall, and that'll kind of set the stage for how far from the wall the piping is gonna be, because I also have to account for the 3/4 inches for this piece of plywood. So what that's ultimately gonna do is help me figure out how far from the wall the inlet valve needs to be for the water. Now I'm hoping that it works out where it comes out like this. I have a plate, I forget the name of the plate that goes around most fittings like this, but I have that plate. But if it works out that it's just about like this, that would be perfect. But yeah, again, so getting the CR tanks up here and figuring out how far away from the wall those valves are gonna be, so for where the piping is gonna be, and then I'll just make whatever necessary adjustment to make sure that this is proper, but this will probably be the last thing that I connect. All right, so real quick overview of the mounting heights for everything. So the bottom of this board is 29 inches off the ground, which I realize does not pertain to most people. This is very specific to my setup, and having the water inlet coming here, running across, and not wanting the tanks to interrupt everything. So again, everything is elevated 6 inches from some of the recommended mounting points or mounting heights for different things that I've seen online, but just to cover them real quick. So the top of the tape represents the top of where everything is gonna go, starting with the CR tanks, right? So the mounting plate for that, or the backing, whatever, the main setup for that will be right about here at the top of this tape at 49 inches. Recommendation is about 43 inches. And again, all of these are just based on, you know, I think the Obsessed Garage settings, but you can customize them for whatever your purpose is. But so this will be 49 inches off the ground versus 43, which is the recommended. Next up is the top of the mounting plate for the hose reel, which will be at 67 inches as opposed to 61. And then finally, the top of the back of the shelf at 74.5 inches. I think recommendation was 68.5. And that leaves just this little amount of board up there, but that's fine because we just need the top of the shelf to sit here, have the pressure washer up here, which again is a little higher probably than would be ideal, but it doesn't matter. Just need to be able to reach the button, which is fine. And then the rest of this will serve mainly as the support for these tanks to be able to drill it in here, since I can't get to the studs on either side. So 49, 67, 74.5. That should be good for our mounting points. Okay, so our first step here is going to be to connect this 3/4 inch male NPT nipple into the female end of this ball valve. So the first step is to take this by looking at it. I'm gonna do 7 to 8 wraps of Teflon tape in a clockwise direction. So clockwise, so that when threaded into its connection, that it doesn't strip the tape in the opposite way, so that it follows the direction of the thread and it tightens it up even further. I'm gonna start it. I've seen some debate, by the way, on whether or not you should start it at the very end of the threading or if you should start it at 1 thread back. I've seen enough to say you should actually start at 1 thread back, so that's what I'm gonna do. So 1 thread back, hold this. I'm gonna give it a little bit of tension. 1, that threads quickly. And that is about 7. Pull that there, tighten that the rest of the way. That should be good. All right, now for the part that I was a little worried about most, and it was threading this into the tanks. So I got both of these set up. And now getting this into here. So for every other valve, for every other fitting, you basically have this setup where you can attach this, you can thread this in, and then orient the handle for however you need it once it's on the wall, right? But this is the only setup where you kind of have to get it threaded in just right in order to have the handle oriented like you need. Now, I would have liked to have had the handle up on top. The problem is that this is in the open direction, and in the closed direction, like this with the handle out, if this were rotated all the way up, it would actually extend a little bit past here. So with this on the wall, it wouldn't be able to be 100% of the way closed, or it would dig into the board, you know, whatever, it just wouldn't work. So my only other options were to have this handle mounted on the bottom and the other one up on the top, or have both of them out this way. So either one would have been acceptable. It seems that with the way that this threaded in, to get it as far as I could go before I thought I wouldn't be able to make another 45-degree or 270-degree rotation, this landed on the bottom, so I think that's good. And then I'll try to get the other one oriented so it's up on top. So I'm gonna get some tape on this, thread it through here, and hopefully that works out the same way. That is the off position, and these are the open position. So that'll work. Or did I want them another quarter turn? So actually, yeah, that's ideal. I thought about having this handle on top and this on bottom, but having it like that, I think that's the way to go. All right, so I ended up redoing this one because I backed it off a little bit, and they say that you should never unthread in order for the sake of alignment. So given that, I just ripped it out, retaped it, and did it again. So to note for this one, to get it aligned like this so that the handle is straight down, I started with the handle in the up position and got 4 full rotations and then another 270 degrees to end it up here. So with that being done, the first piece, we can now get this on the wall. So I have my midpoint here, and then this line should be perfectly level. Let's take this, get rid of that. There you go. So that's pretty good. Not bad. So that's going to be our reference point. Get the tanks up here and mark the holes. All right, so now that I got my mounting points all set up here, I'm going to use 2.5-inch by 1/4-inch lag screws with 1/4-inch washers. So I'm going to drill a 3/16-inch pilot hole and then get this going. All right. All right, that is pretty solid. Boom, look at that. Laser guide for the win. We will debadge this. That looks better. Sorry, Spotless. All right, so next steps, I'm gonna get this threaded up. So I'm gonna get some tape on both of these ends, get this connected, and then make our first aluminum pipe cut to join these two sections. So this will all be one unit, and then I can take that over here and see what it's gonna take. So it should just be a direct fitting onto here with the T-fitting. So I'm not gonna really need any space here. So that'll bring the whole unit just this far out from, not that it matters, it's proximity from the backing plate, but still. So as a reference point. So this will come out here. Here's our T-clamp. Here will be our pass-through valve right here. And then I'll, figure out how much pipe I need to go down and across. That'll probably be one of the last things that I do. But we'll get this set up, run up here, go across, get our pipe here, and then up to our bucket fill. I don't know if that makes a whole lot of sense with a hand waving in front of the camera, but I'm just talking through this. All right, so this section is done. So I went ahead and wrapped all of the NPT threads with 7 to 8 wraps of the Teflon tape. So I did here with the NPT to GHT fitting, and then over here. So this is the same exact fitting as this one right here. However, this one did not work out. So that one thread into here and here perfectly. This is the same exact piece, but it did not work as well. I think the threads were just a tad bit off here. Stainless steel is not nearly as forgiving. So I had to go ahead and order another one of these, which is fine because I didn't think I was gonna get this done tonight anyway. But in any case, all of the other NPT threads are wrapped. So I did a 4-inch cut because it says that you need a 2-inch insertion length into any of the fittings, right? So I was kind of wondering, like, is 4 enough, and then have these two butt right up against each other? Seems to be okay. I was thinking maybe you need an extra 1/2 inch or an inch or something like that, but I don't think that's the case. And in the pictures that I've seen, it looks like these come right up against each other if you do a 4-inch cut. Incidentally, the cutter tool that they provide is fantastic. So they provide, again, the cutter tool, the deburr tool, and even a little spray bottle, because you're supposed to spray the ends with water before installing them to make sure that everything glides in smoothly. So this is done, went pretty well. And next I'll demonstrate on this setup here. So I'm gonna get this on the wall to the tanks and then just keep going from there. So first up, I'm gonna mark a 4-inch section of pipe. Now again, you can do a little bit more if you want to, but 4 is the minimum necessary, and if you want to butt these end to end, you just need 4 inches. All right, next up, I'm going to take their cutting tool, which again works really well. So next up, we're going to take the deburring tool. So this has an inner cutter and an outer cutter. So we're just going to do both sides, inside and outside, to deburr the aluminum pipe. There you go. All right, so next up, we are going to join these two segments here, or two fittings here. So we're going to spray each end and then loosen up this side. And once it feels like it kind of goes in, it's only part way through. Then you have to sort of push through the fitting. You don't have to twist this off all the way. In fact, let me take a minute to show you what one of these looks like. So when you undo one of these fittings, right? Every single one has 3 components, actually 4. So there's an O-ring inside of all the fittings. You can kind of maybe see that there. So this is facing outwards. So you have 3 sections here. All right, let's break these out individually. So you have this blue plastic piece that is on the very end of the fitting. You have this very thin aluminum ring right here with teeth that sort of line up with this fitting, and then all of it sits inside this black fitting. So in order to make sure that this is correct if this comes apart, so you want to make sure you line up this tab right here with the blue piece, and then that goes in the wide end of the black piece. Just like that. And you take that, and then the cap goes on top. Just like that. And this is what fits onto the fitting. So the idea is that you loosen this enough that you get the pipe all the way inserted, which it is, which is good, and then hand tighten. And then this should be about 2 inches left. So if you're all the way seated, if you only cut a 4-inch piece, you should see that you have about 2 inches remaining, which is right about where we are here. Let's wet this again. There you go. As you kind of start to screw this in more, you can push in some more. And a little bit more, and then just keep going until you are all the way seated. And then for the last step, you can attach right there. That should be pretty tight. And there you go. That is a pretty solid connection. There's a little bit of the pipe showing, and that should be fine. Hopefully that's fine. I'm talking like I know. I don't really know. I guess I'll find out when I turn the water on, but this feels really, really tight. And yeah, I think this is okay. All right, so let's talk about my first mistake that I know of. All right, So on all of the fittings where you have aluminum pipe that fits into it, these notches represent where the pipe stops at, right? So from here to the opening, you know, is 2 inches because all of the fittings require 2 inches of insertion length. So the only thing I kind of messed up was that the notches for this are on the backside. I didn't line it. I should have rotated this 180 degrees to have the notches on the outside. They're not on both sides, they're only on one side. That would make measuring to see how much pipe I'm gonna need for the right side of this assembly a little bit easier. So I just took a piece of tape, wrapped it around, kind of estimate right about here is where that notch would be. And then so you would measure from that notch up to this bottom one. So I just measured that. That comes out to about 11 3/4 inches. I'm gonna measure that 1 or 2 more times just to make sure. Cut that piece of aluminum and then install the elbow fitting here, that piece of aluminum here, and then figure out what I need from this end to end, and then cut that bar that's gonna go across here. Okay, so I've been thinking about how to accurately measure from here to here. It's kind of tricky because once you get this in place, it's gonna be hard to fit the bar across here because you need 2 inches in each, and it's kind of weird. I don't know if you can really angle it out. Well, is there anything that the laser level won't do? So I set the laser up here. It's kind of hard to see because I'm kind of standing in front of it. But anyway, the line's right here, barely touching the edge of this pipe. This pipe is exactly 2 inches, which is what we're gonna need for insertion into the elbow. And then you can see the marker, well, you can't see, but if you were looking at this, the marker right here shows where the pipe is going to stop. So this lines up with that. So if I have the laser started here and running up the wall, in theory, I should be able to measure from this mark here straight across. Double check that this is actually level, but it seems to land exactly on 28, like literally on the perfect, man, wish I had my phone. Wish I could get an extra set of hands and get my phone out because it lines up on 28 like perfectly. Again, this guy here, and then so that way this entire thing should be able to slide into place simultaneously here in the bottom right-hand corner. I'm probably over-explaining that, but I'm partially verifying it in my head as I'm relaying it to the camera, to you guys. So anyway, I think that should work. So again, one more, nod to if you're gonna do a real custom setup, highly advise getting the 7-foot piece of aluminum because I would not have been able to do that with just what was provided. Again, you could use a coupler, not a big deal, but I don't know, I think it's cleaner with a straight bar. All right, moment of truth for this section. So spray this with a little, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned this is actually a blend of very mild soap and water, not just water. Pretty secure. All right, so I estimated this was 11 5/8 inches, maybe just a fraction more would have been spot on, but again, I'll take. So all we have to do next is tomorrow I will attach the bucket fill section once I have that valve. And then we just got to do the bottom bar that runs across and run up here. The funny thing is that I did a loose measurement of how much I think I'm going to need. And I think I'm going to use every last bit of that 7. I thought after a 7-foot 6-inch tube, and I really didn't waste anything. But I thought after all of that, I was going to have a ton of aluminum pipe left over. Turns out I'm probably going to use every last bit of it. And by the way, so all of this explaining might be a little bit disjointed. I'm filming this in tiny little pieces as I go along because I'm figuring this out as I go along. But I am also writing this down separately. So at the very least, if the little video segments don't make sense, or if you don't feel like watching all of the explanation of the entire install, I will include the steps that I took to do this. Not to say that that is the official guide to install, but I will just include the steps that I took to assemble all of this and put it either in the description, like, bullet point or numbered, or just make it in a Google Doc that I'll attach. Okay, so the next section I wanted to figure out here is exactly how far from the wall am I gonna be able to have to position this thing such that, you know, am I gonna be able to fit this all the way up against the hole here and then just run the plate over top of it or behind it? Or am I gonna need a little bit of PEX coming out of the wall? So I already did this, I'll do it again and just check on a different section here. But just loosely sort of estimating by having this fitting right up against here and looking. So this doesn't even quite touch the wall. So I'm definitely gonna have some PEX coming out of the wall, so I am glad I got the blue. But just double checking this. I measured about 1 inch on that side. It's really about 1.25 inches. Yeah, so about 1.25 inches. So 1.25 inches of PEX coming out, which even though I'm sacrificing a little bit of a finished look, I do get a slightly easier installation because with that much PEX coming out of the wall, I can basically just cut a big old piece, send it through the crawl space, make the connection in the crawl space, and then just cut it 1.25 inches sticking out of the wall and then clamp this fitting onto it. All right, so before moving on with the rest of this installation, I figured this was a good moment to include this, so I messed something up, right? So I realized that I didn't tighten these all the way with hand tools. And in my attempt to try to do so, I partially turned the wrong direction, so I'm concerned that I might have unthreaded the tape. Probably not, but being hyper paranoid, I would rather just take this apart and redo this little section here rather than turn it on after it's all done and then find out that I have a leak, right? So it's just worth mentioning that this is fairly easy to take apart. So if you just unscrew the pieces here, you can kind of just pull the pipe out. And even though the metal ring inside sort of clamps onto the pipe when you install it, it's still easy enough to remove once you have it installed. Like that, right? So this kind of sticks on, you can sort of see it kind of chews up the end of the pipe because the teeth that are inside the metal ring kind of, you know, or what hold it into place. But again, it can still be removed fairly easily. Another thing to mention that I think I forgot, the threads for these fittings, for all of the different fittings that have the hex thread, I think this is 1 3/8 inches. You might want to double check, but it's probably a good idea to have a plumber's wrench that opens to at least 1.5 inches. All right, so next up is the PEX pipe connection in the crawl space. The pipe here measured that it was going to be about 1 and maybe 1/4 inches out from the edge of the wall. So I'm going to go connect this in the crawl space and then we can finish up out here. So real quick, even though this probably isn't really relevant to the setup because everybody's install is going to be different from their water line, I thought I would still include what I'm using for the whole PEX pipe assembly. So have a crimp ring tool right here. Also, this is a crimp ring remover. Have some 3/4 inch crimp rings, pipe clamp just in case, the couplings, which I don't think I'm gonna need this because I'm only crimping this to an existing T-fitting that the water splits at, so I don't think I need these, but bought it just in case. Then to tighten this up in the hole in the wall, have some silicone putty, and then the flange that the pipe is gonna come out of to try to dress up the area a little bit. All right, so here is the existing fitting. So this was the old pipe that I cut that was going off to the garage. So I'm gonna cut this ring here and then replace this with the new pipe. This is a nifty little feature the plumber installed. So because it gets freezing cold temperatures here in the winter, just to make sure that there isn't any issue with the water freezing, he added a drain valve here. So this should drain all of the water that is in the system, which is just a nice extra, but that is why that there is the T-fitting here. So I'm gonna try to make a nice square cut here, 1 1/4 inches, and then I got the crimp ring, so fit this on to the barb, crimp it, hopefully we'll be good to go. Don't you love it when you have something and you put it down, and then 2 seconds later you can't find it? All right, last thing I meant to mention is this useful go, no-go gauge. I couldn't really demonstrate it in the crawl space because it was just really low on light, But so here is our 3/4 go. That looks pretty good. And then no go. Awesome. So I was gonna put some molding clay in here. I'm gonna see how well this holds. I can always pull this back and add it in later if I want to. I also wanna make sure that everything is cool before I get this sort of sealed in place. We'll see how this holds. It looks nice. But if there's any fluctuation when you turn the water on, then I'll just pull this back, add in some clay, and seal it up. All right, so in finishing up, got the laser level set up again. Have I mentioned that it's my new favorite tool? In my very precise measuring system here. Yeah, you like that? Anyway, so have to measure pipe coming down here. Got an elbow joint there, or an elbow piece over here. So this looks to be pretty well aligned. And then right here. So I'm gonna measure from, and again, this is where I wish I'd inverted this, which I could have done since I took this off, I didn't think of it. But anyway, so the notch that is back here, so this is our end point, and then running down, and I'll just kind of float an elbow piece there to try to figure out what the midpoint is gonna be. And hopefully get a good enough estimate, get the last 2 pieces of aluminum cut, and then make this last connection. All right, so this is loosely where the backing plate is gonna be for the hose reel. Actually, it's gonna be down just a little bit further. I was trying to play around with the different areas here. Fortunately, because I didn't do a perfect job on covering up the recessed wood screw heads, I kind of know where they are. It's actually very helpful. So right here is this one, and this one's down just a tad bit more. So I had to adjust a little bit, make sure I didn't run into those. So I got the first shelf mounted here. The other one will go there. Well, the hole is marked out for the pilot holes here. Next one there. And then we'll mount the shelf directly under that. And that'll probably give me about an inch and a half, maybe 2 inches of clearance space for the hose reel above the pipe. So shelf is up. Ran into a couple of issues, really just one issue. So we got right here. So of course I didn't drill a pilot hole big enough. I did the 3/8 inch and it really needed the 7/32 inch. So of course, as I was finishing up here, bolt snapped. So I was not able to, it came out, but I was of course not able to get the thread that is now in the studs. So I used this hole down here to drill a second one, which leaves this open looking ugly. So I'm gonna fix that up. Not quite sure how, but can't leave it like that. Otherwise, it's good. So these were the same bolts that I used, the same lag screws that I used to secure the back of the tank. So those are 2.5 inch by 1/4 inch lag screws with 1/4 inch washers. And then this hardware comes with the shelf. It's just attaches the top of the shelf here, and that is a 9mm nut to tighten that up. Seems pretty sturdy, and more importantly, it's level. So good stuff. All right, so in preparation for the backing plate, just wanted to point out, so when you get this from Obsessed Garage, you get 4 of these 2.25 inch by 1/4 inch lag bolts with 1/4 inch washers. And then these are 5mm Allen bolts that hold the hose reel onto the backing plate. Mounting bracket is up. And of course, because this is the last thing that I had to drill, it would stand to reason that I would mess this one up the most. Yeah, right there. So went to go drill. I was a little off alignment. Man, this side has been my rough side. So I was off alignment, didn't hit a stud, came over a little bit more, but it wasn't quite aligned. So the whole thing shifted a little bit. It was minimal, but just enough to annoy me. So then I had to come down a little bit further. So I lost that spacing that I wanted to create from here. It's still enough for clearance, but not as much as I wanted, but it's fine, it'll still work. But yeah, that was a little messy. Not my best work, but it's on, stable, it's level. So I'm gonna go figure out what I need to do to get the jumper hose set up on the reel and then get that up on the wall. So this is the jumper hose I got. I got all this stuff from Clean Garage, and what they went ahead and already added a quick disconnect to the one end of the jumper hose. So this is the end that will go to the pressure washer. And then, so this is the end that's gonna go here into the reel inlet. So this is gonna get 3 or 4, probably 4 wraps of Teflon tape included with this. So this came, I already tore it off, but this came kind of packaged together. So this is the handle. Undo this end here. And then that gets tightened up there. Can't do it with one hand, but you get the idea. And then on the inside inlet here, right? So this is where the end of, again, same thing. One of the end of the hoses already came with a quick disconnect, and this is the end, gets 4 wraps of the Teflon tape, and that gets mounted in here. And then this here, so once you thread the main pressure washer hose in through here, then you can unscrew this, guide the hose in here, snap it back into place, and then once you wind it, this is its starting point on the right-hand side. All right, so I got this started. Just want to point this out. So I removed the thing that holds the hose to the edge of the reel here. So when you crank it, it aligns itself on the right. This, because the Cobra Jet hose has this long, whatever this is, black plastic piece here, you can bend it. You have to bend it a lot in order to get this started. So this is a super tight fit, but you can get it going. So Teflon tape on the end of the hose got this started, and you can just grab an adjustable wrench and tighten it the rest of the way. Gotta charge the hose before wrapping it though, because it's flat. So I don't wanna roll this up yet. And it's raining, so dragging that outside is gonna be a boatload of fun, but that's all right. So what do we got left? We got to attach the hose to the pressure washer. Then we got this to plug into the pressure washer, and then just assemble the right-hand side, which, by the way, my GHT to NPT thingy showed up. So let's get that done. So we're getting there. Like a charm. Awesome. So we got some Teflon tape on this, 7 wraps per side, and then get this attached. Actually, 7 wraps only on the NPT side, because the hose has its own, the hose has a gasket. So don't need Teflon tape on that. Technically, everything is connected. Well, forgot the tanks. But after the tanks, everything is ready to go. The only thing I still got to do besides the tanks is rig this up behind here. If there's one major regret that I have, it is not getting an outlet put up here in preparation for the pressure washer. So ideally the outlet would have been there so you wouldn't have the plug in the way. Not optimal, but what are you gonna do? So you figure out a clean way to this is a lot of cable. So figure out a clean way to kind of cinch that up and situate it behind the pressure washer, and then try to run it somewhat neatly down here. All right, so when it comes to installing one of these tanks, right? Couldn't figure out why it wasn't a fit on the first one. That was because I did not notice that there was a giant tuft of this brown, packaging paper at the bottom of the tube. So once you remove that, it will fit way better. So put the canister back in. Don't forget the centering ring. And it should very easily screw in. And then once it's reasonably on, you can use this tightener to get it the rest of the way. Yeah, good enough. Now, the only thing that sucks is this label has to get removed, but it's one of those ones where you start to peel it off and it just rips off. So gonna have to clean that up. But otherwise, tanks are good. Quick pro tip before turning this all on right now. So, highly advise before you connect your hose to the hose reel to fully unwind it, because I did not. It was, as you probably saw, in a twisted mess. That's 75 feet. That is really, really long. It seems considerably longer than the 50-foot that I've been using, so much so that it makes me wonder, did I really have a 50-foot or is this really 75? Because it is long. Anyway, I did not fully unwind it before twisting it or securing it into place here in the hose reel. And so as a result, as I was trying to unwind it, as you can imagine, 75 feet of hose when it's in a coil, not easy to get apart. So anyway, definitely make sure that you completely uncoil the hose before fixing it into place. All right, all valves off. Moment of truth. Gonna go turn the water on. Actually, I'm gonna be in the crawl space turning the water on with a walkie-talkie to my wife, who's gonna be out here to let me know if anything leaks right off the bat. So I figure the water will come in, stop here. So if this is good, then I'll turn this on, which will send the water up, over, and down, and then I'll stop here. We'll also send it up to the pressure washer. And if that works, turn this on. And if that works, then I'll turn this off and then turn these on. I'm just making this up. I don't know, whatever, we'll see. Do it live. All right, so we ran into a little bit of an issue on the first attempt to pressurize the system. And of course, it was the very first port of entry right here. So this PEX barb to NPT fitting right there. Yep, it leaked. It wasn't a terrible leak, but any leak is terrible. So initially, first try, started leaking, turned the water off, and then I tried retightening this and tried again. The leak was less bad, but it was still there. So at that point, I just took this entire assembly apart from here all the way back to in the crawl space to the PEX pipe going to the T-fitting. So I ripped everything apart, mainly here. I rewrapped the NPT part of this connector. And then actually this is the only part in the system where I gave it a little bit of thread sealant. So I put a little ring of thread sealant around the first couple of threads of that. And then I took 2 adjustable wrenches, put all of my weight on it to try to tighten that as best I could, to the point where like I physically couldn't move it anymore. So after that, reconnected everything, recrimped here, and then redid the connection into the crawl space. Now granted, that was a whole new problem, because once that happened, this was fine. Then I had a leak, and by leak I mean like 1 bead of water in the crawl space at the T fitting. Well, that was a whole other headache, and you guys aren't here to hear about my PEX issues. This is about the wall-mounted system. Nonetheless, I eventually got it figured out, eventually got it working, and so now the system has been pressurized, and it seems to be holding. Seems to be holding. Well, guys, it is done, and it's awesome. Absolutely love it. As soon as my paranoia gives way, I'm gonna love it even more. Then I'll be really excited about it. Right now, I'm still kind of on edge about the system actually existing, functioning, not failing, hopefully, God willing. So, all right, let's walk through this, right? Let me step through this. So once the leak was fixed here, turn the water on, all the valves were closed, water comes up and stops here. So at this point, I'm like, okay, clearly these 2 connections are good. After that, it was opening this valve and letting the water flow throughout the rest of the system up until this point. That was good. Then I opened up the valve for the bucket fill hose. That was good. It tested out the hose with the pressure washer hose still on the ground. Like I said, you don't want to reel this up before it's been charged. So tested out the hose after all the air sputtered out of that. That worked out pretty good. And then the last thing was testing the tanks. So I closed this valve, opened these valves, let this fill up, and again, tested all the hose connections, and they looked good too. So that kind of summarizes my 4 points of absolute terrifying paranoia when initially testing the system. The first test was the water, making sure that it didn't leak. Second test was going through the tanks, because when that filled up with water, I'm like, dude, this is like 30, 40 pounds by itself. So having this fill up with water, I can only imagine how much extra weight that adds. Again, this is why we have the backing plate. Third was testing out the actual pressure washer, because despite the 4 rubber mounts at the bottom, it still vibrates a little bit when you run it. And so making sure the shelf held up and all that. And then the last thing was, after the hose was charged, winding that up. Again, once I get over the paranoia of this thing not failing, then I'll be really happy. I may or may not have a couple of moisture sensors being delivered today between 5 and 10 o'clock, and mainly for the crawl space, and maybe one right here, just for now, just for a little while. So a couple of things that I would mention, or at least reiterate. One, kind of thinking in the reverse order. your hose. Don't connect the hose to the hose reel before you have fully uncoiled it, because that was a tremendous hassle to attempt to do that. Next up is making sure these connections are ridiculously tight. Fortunately, I did not have any leaks other than the one here, but I think that is partly due to the fact that I redid everything, right? Not everything, but like when this just main loop was assembled, I was not 100% sure or confident that these connections were tight enough, right? So I was able to tighten these in place without having to remove anything, but when it came to doing the left side, yeah, I kind of screwed that up. I tightened the wrong way, which I feel probably disturbed the Teflon tape. So rather than, and I'm sure there's like a tolerance maybe for it, but I didn't want to risk it. So I ended up just pulling the left-hand side assembly off and just redid the whole thing. Took everything apart, retaped, retightened, like really tightened, and then reassembled, and I feel like that was worth it. So far, so good, so I guess that was worth it. Two things that I thought were kind of tedious with this. One was the cutting of the aluminum pipe and deburring. The other thing was just alignment. Since I have my badass laser aligner, thingy, I should have used that to exactly pinpoint the studs. Like I knew where the studs were based on the fact that I could still see the recess marks for the wood screws that I drilled into the plywood. But I wish I would have kept the laser shining on so that when I was trying to map out the shelf and the hose reel backing plate, had I done that, I wouldn't have missed one of the studs on the right-hand side, which then caused me to have to drop the backing plate a little bit to correctly catch the stud. It was a stupid mistake to make. I can't even claim that I was rushing. I wasn't rushing. It was just a dumb mistake. Other than that, it was just a take your time kind of thing. So anyway, guys, hope you have enjoyed this video. Hope you got something from it. If you're considering this project, feel free to drop a question or something like that. I'll do my best to answer. So stay tuned for the rest of the garage build finishing up. It's been about a month so far, so I'm excited to get this all wrapped up. And more F80 content coming soon. Got a couple of things coming up with the car. So anyway, again, hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a like if you did. Subscribe if you have not already, and I will catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.